Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursdays Live with Chug. Each week, we cover pressing topics that matter to you and your business. I'm Arianna Gonzalez from Chug, attorneys and CPAs tuning in from our San Diego office. Please join me in welcoming partner and attorney Gladys Gervacio and immigration lead Dolores Co from our Los Angeles, California office. Hi there, Dolores and Gladys, and welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, Arianna. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. Today's topic is back by popular demand. Gladys and Dolores will be guiding us through the latest H-1B cap updates as of February 2024. Just a quick disclaimer for everyone who's tuning in. We are live on LinkedIn and Facebook. This conversation is for informational purposes only. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. So if you have questions, please comment them below or email us at info@chug.com. Now let's get right into it. Gladys, can you share with us what is the updated H-1B electronic registration process for fiscal year 2025?
Sure, Arianna. So any employer or company who wants to file an H-1B cap petition to bring in a foreign worker is required to submit a registration, an electronic registration with the USCIS. So under this process, the company provides basic information about the company and about the beneficiary and pays a registration fee of $10 to register for this fiscal year 2025. Now, there is a 14-day registration period. And for this fiscal year, the registration period opens on March 6, 12 noon Eastern Time, and will end on March 22nd, 12 noon also Eastern Time. Again, the registration fee is $10 for now. It's going to jump up next year. But I think the main update to this 2025 registration process, one of the main updates is USCIS implementing a beneficiary-centric selection process.
Thanks for sharing that info, Gladys. So it seems like the registration period is coming up, so make sure you guys don't wait for that and definitely reach out to us if you have any questions about this process. Dolores, can you talk about how the new beneficiary-centric selection process for the H-1B registration works?
Sure. So for the past H-1B registrations, beneficiaries were assigned registration numbers that were entered into the selection process. Now, under the beneficiary-centric process, registrations will be selected by specific beneficiary rather than registrations. So USCIS will require registrants to provide a valid passport or travel information for each beneficiary. Additionally, the registration will acknowledge the beneficiary's master's cap eligibility, which is determined on whether a beneficiary has earned a U.S. master's or higher degree from a U.S. institution of higher education. So the electronic registration system will prohibit a beneficiary from being registered under more than one passport or travel document. Each beneficiary who has a registration submitted on their behalf will be entered into the selection process once, regardless of how many number of registration were submitted on their behalf. So each beneficiary who has upon selection, each registrant employer who submitted a registration for the chosen beneficiary will receive notification and become eligible to file a petition. All employers, registrants can file the H-1B, but the beneficiary may opt to choose for which employer he wants to pursue the petition or cooperate with. Not all employers have to file. So the beneficiary can discuss with each employer registrant, so to whom he wishes to cooperate with, just for transparency purposes, right? So it is important to note that each registrant employer will receive notification independently without knowledge of other registrant employers who submitted registration for the selected beneficiary. So this is to ensure that the beneficiary will only utilize one allocated visa opportunity despite of many registration filed for his behalf. So this individual, like I said, this individual restriction is to ensure that the beneficiary will only utilize one allocated visa opportunity, even if there's multiple registrations submitted by different employer registrants.
That's such great information, Dolores. It is really important for people to keep in mind that, they are only going to be taking one application per person. So make sure that you aren't submitting multiple applications. It's not going to work in your favor. They will only accept one. So great information, Dolores. I appreciate you sharing that. Gladys, can you share with us what the specific integrity measures introduced have been to reduce fraud in the H-1B registration process?
So USCIS has always been committed to strengthening the integrity of the H-1B CAP registration process and ensuring and preventing fraud and misuse or abuse of the system. In the past registration periods, USCIS has this attestation requirement. So it requires the employer, the company submitting the registration, to attest under penalty of perjury that all the information being submitted in the registration are correct. Second, that there's a legitimate job offer for the beneficiary. Third, that it did not work with anyone, or any entity, individual, company to unfairly increase the chance of selection of that beneficiary. And so we've had this attestation requirement in the past few years, but last year was a different story. So during fiscal year 2024, USCIS received about 780,000 CAP registrations, out of which more than half, about 408,000, they discovered were for beneficiaries that had multiple registrations. And so there was a serious concern that there might be some abuse or misuse of the system, and that registrants were gaming the system to get more chances of getting selected. And that's why they're implementing, and this is major, this beneficiary-centric selection process, which Dolores has just explained. And so it's a welcome change for sure.
Wow, that's pretty crazy news, Gladys. I can't believe, they had so many duplicate applications. So do we have any information on how USCIS plans to enforce the rules against these fake attestations in the H-1B registrations?
So USCIS has stated that if it finds out that there's the company submitted a false attestation, then they would consider the registration as improperly submitted and will not allow the petitioner or the company to submit an H-1B petition. It can also deny an H-1B petition if it discovers information that is false based on the registration. It can also revoke an already approved petition. And USCIS has also stated that it can refer, individuals or companies to law enforcement agencies for investigation or even prosecution. And this is what they have said, that, they've done extensive fraud investigations last year. They're continuing to do so. And they have even referred, some companies or entities for criminal prosecution. And so it's serious, they're serious about making sure that all the information you provide are true and correct.
It sounds like there are some pretty serious consequences for those who are trying to abuse the system. So if you guys have questions about this process, you need clarification, reach out to us anytime at info@treat.com. We're happy to help you out with this process. So Dolores, can you share with us how this new requirement for valid passport or travel document information for each beneficiary will affect the registration process?
So the valid passport or travel document requirement is designed to ensure that each beneficiary will have the same chance of getting selected in the lottery. the fiscal year 2025 H-1B electronic registration form is very similar to past years. You only need to provide basic information for the prospective employer as well as the beneficiary. But one change this year, as Gladys pointed out, is that USCIS will require H-1B registrants to provide valid passport information or valid travel document information for each beneficiary. Each beneficiary to be registered must have a valid passport, again, must have a valid passport or travel document. I know in the past years, we've allowed, expired passport because these are like one of just the means to identify the beneficiary. But this year, it needs to be valid. I know you will hear us saying it needs to be valid and expired throughout the presentation because we need to stress that point out. So, the passport travel document provided must be the same as the beneficiary used to enter the United States. If or when they are still outside of the United States, these must be the same document that they will use to enter the United States if they receive their H-1B visa. So each beneficiary must be registered, and again, each beneficiary must be registered under only one passport or travel document. The only narrow exception is that provision that a travel document may be used in lieu of a valid passport for those beneficiaries that cannot obtain passport, for example, stateless individuals and refugees. Also, there's a very limited exception for countries like Venezuela, who the passport cannot be extended, although they are extended by an enacted law. So those are very narrow exception to the valid passport. So following the registration, each unique beneficiary will be entered into the selection process only once, regardless of the number of registrations submitted on behalf of that particular beneficiary. Once it's selected, the registrant, meaning the employer petitioner who submitted registration for that selected beneficiary, will be notified and will be eligible to file a petition on that beneficiary's behalf during the applicable petition filing period. The H-1B must be supported by the H-1B must be supported by the same identification document provided in the registration. However, USCIS, in its discretion, may accept exception and allow changes such as name change due to marriage, change in gender identity, change in passport number or validity dates due to renewal or replacement before the petition can be filed. So the valid passport or travel document requirement is part of the HS measures to combat fraud, which Gladys has amplified earlier on.
Those are great points, Dolores. And of course, one of the most important ones, make sure your passport is valid. If you guys are questioning any of those exceptions that Dolores mentioned, reach out to us. We're happy to help you out with those. So Dolores, what happens if USCIS finds out that a beneficiary registered using different passports or travel documents? What are the consequences?
So under the new system, beneficiary may not be registered under more than one passport or travel document. If USCIS determines that there are multiple registrations submitted for the same beneficiary using different identifying information, USCIS may find those registrations invalid and deny or revoke the approval of the beneficiary's H-1B petition. So be cognizant about this and cross-check the information before submitting the registration to avoid erroneous information, as once the registration is submitted, it cannot be changed unless the registration period is still open, and you will have the opportunity to delete those incorrect or duplicate entries. Please note, though, that if you had to delete a beneficiary from the registration, the filing fees for the registration will not be refunded. In addition, USCIS has authority to deny or revoke an H-1B petition where the statement in the petition, H-1B registration, labor condition application, or temporary labor certification are found to be inaccurate, fraudulent, or misrepresented, which includes, as Gladys pointed out earlier, the attestation, the H-1B registration, through which registrants confirm a true offer of employment. Now, please note that USCIS has not changed its policy on companies colluding for the purposes of entering multiple registration for the same beneficiary. So USCIS has indicated that they will use methods to determine improper submission, such as beneficiaries submitting different passport information from different countries. For example, those who have dual citizenship or those nationals of multiple countries. And then when a duplicate is submitted, they will reject all registration. Remember, if they found out that there are multiple registration for the same beneficiary, they will reject all of the registration for any such candidate. Or if the petition is already approved, they will seek to revoke it.
Those are great things to keep in mind, Dolores, and especially making sure that the information that they're filing is correct and they're filing, everything accurately. So Gladys, how will USCIS handle registration submitted with multiple eligible registrations for the same beneficiary? Do we have any information on that?
Yes, Arianna. So USCIS recognizes that a beneficiary may have legitimate job offers from different unrelated companies. And so under the new beneficiary-centric selection process, these beneficiaries, these employers can submit registrations on behalf of this beneficiary, provided, of course, that the beneficiary uses the same valid passport. So that's the main identifier, is that same passport for that specific beneficiary. Now, if this beneficiary gets selected in the lottery, then all of the employers or the companies will be notified, and they will be given a chance to submit H-1B cap petitions for these beneficiaries. And so all of these companies who have legitimate job offers for that specific beneficiary will get selection notices and will be able to file H-1B cap petitions. So just to illustrate, let's say John registered under company A during the registration period, and it so happens that company B has a legitimate job offer to John as well, and registers him during the registration period, submitting the same passport information. Same with company C. All three companies, company A, B, and C, will each get a selection notice and will be able to file H-1B cap petitions for John.
That's really great information, Gladys. I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. Can you touch on how the final rule changes the H-1B registration fee for fiscal year 2026?
Okay, so the final rule on the fee increases takes effect on April 1st. And so for fiscal year 2025, during this cap registration process, the registration fee remains at $10 per registration fee. But once the registrations are selected and it's time to submit the H-1B cap petitions, the new fees will be applicable for the filing fees for those H-1B cap petitions. Now, for sure, for fiscal year 2026, the registration fee jumps from $10 to $215 per registration.
Wow, that's a big jump, Gladys. So if you guys have questions about this or you want to get this filed, before the jump, definitely reach out to us. We can help you guys out with that. Gladys, do you have any advice for employers who are facing the increased H-1B registration fee? What should they do? What's your advice?
Well, our advice has always been to plan, plan accordingly, prepare your roster of candidates. Maybe you can, put in more for the fiscal year 2025, but again, on the premise that you have a legitimate job offer for these employees.
What about the consequences of submitting an H-1B registration with declined, not reconciled, disputed, or otherwise invalid fees? What are the consequences? What are we looking at?
So it's always the registrant's responsibility to ensure valid payment. If a payment is declined, then the registration is invalidated. If a payment is later not reconciled or is disputed or is rejected, then the registration is also invalidated. Now, if the registration is invalidated while the registration period is open, that's okay, right? Because you can the petitioner can still submit a new registration and ensure valid payment. But if you later find out that the payment didn't go through after the registration period closes, then that's it. Then you don't have a valid registration.
So it sounds like it's important to stay up to date on the notes that you're receiving from them if they're sending any updates and making sure that, your information is up to date and accurate. You paid the filing fees, and just staying up to date with all of that information so that if there is anything you need to fix, you can do that before the date closes. So Dolores, can you share with us what steps employers should take to ensure compliance with the new H-1B registration requirements?
So we encourage, like Gladys said, we encourage employers to start planning now. So meet with your staff and legal representative, decide who will be your administrator, decide who will initiate the administrator account if none exists. So more on this topic in future sessions. But we encourage employers to immediately identify the potential CAP beneficiaries for registration. Employers should collaborate with their potential CAP beneficiaries, making sure that their documents are in order, the passports are valid, or travel documents, and essentially to prepare their documentation for registration.
Thanks for that info, Dolores. You did mention something about an administrator account. Gladys, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Sure, Arianna. So this is also one of the main updates that and changes that USCIS is implementing for this fiscal year 2025. And it's called the organizational account. So they are launching it this year, this CAP season. And what is this is there's an organizational account for companies and an organizational account for legal representatives. And this is an online platform where both the company and the legal representatives can collaborate. And this is actually in response to complaints and concerns of the business communities and the legal communities from previous registration periods that we're doing redundant data entry, that the digital handshake, electronic handshake doesn't work, and all of that. So they are trying to improve the system with this organizational accounts. And so a company can actually create a company group account, assign an administrator who can sign, pay for, and submit the forms. And this administrator can also invite members of his team to prepare the registration forms to assist him. I think we'll be devoting another session on this topic, mainly organizational accounts, I believe next Thursday. So stay tuned for that one, and we'll definitely give more information on the organizational accounts as and when it gets rolled out by USCIS.
That's great information. I appreciate you breaking that down for us, Gladys. So Dolores, what are the expected benefits of the updated H-1B registration and selection process for employers and beneficiaries?
So since the selection process will involve like a unique identifier in the form of valid passport, travel document, for the beneficiaries, the most significant benefits, of course, is that each beneficiary will have the same chance of getting selected regardless of how many registrations are submitted on their behalf. So nobody gets a 75%, a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. It's going to be same chances for each beneficiary that goes into the selection process. For employers, of course, their candidates have equal chance of being selected.
That's great that they're putting measures in place to make sure it's fair for everyone applying for this process. So Gladys, how will the changes impact the timing and strategy for the H-1B cap season preparation?
So USCIS said that they will be launching the organizational accounts no later than February 28th. So that's going to be next week. In the meantime, the CAP registration opens on March 6th. So there's not sufficient time, between these two dates. And so that's why we keep reminding employers while we're waiting for USCIS to launch this organizational accounts. It's a good time to plan and discuss amongst your team, who's going to have administrator functions and who's going to have team member functions, and also discuss with your legal representatives and reach and find out, do you want us to collaborate online during this process? It's not sufficient time. We'll deal with what we have, of course, and we'll make sure that for our clients, we'll be ready to submit registrations for this fiscal year.
That's great advice, Gladys. And yes, if you guys have questions, reach us anytime at info@chug.com. We would love to help you out with this. So Dolores, can you tell us what are the recommended best practices for using the online filing options for forms I-129 and I-907?
So as of this time, we have yet to test the online option. As you know, online filings for I-907 and I-129s are still unavailable. I think we need to have another Thursday live session to be able to test the system and its functionality to be able to make recommendations, really. But generally, online filings are intended to be simpler than the paper filing. Hopefully, that will be the case with the I-129s and the I-907s as well. And with any type of filing, it's always recommended to have all the information ready to fill out the form fills. But one thing though, USCIS has stated that there will be no difference in the length of adjudication between the paper filed petition and the online filed. However, online filing will have inherent time-saving features, like USCIS can receive the petition like the minute you submitted it, not having to wait for the mailing time, not to allow like days for the mailing time. And you can readily submit documentation if you so need in case of RFEs and those things.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dolores. We appreciate that. Gladys, can you close us out with some of the key takeaways from the USCIS announcements for future H-1B cap seasons?
Sure, Arianna. So these updates to the H-1B cap registration process, they're a welcome change. I mean, we welcome them. We're all for strengthening the system, preventing fraud, preventing misuse and abuse of the system. We want every beneficiary to also have the same chance of getting selected in the lottery, and it's fair for both the beneficiary and the employer as well. So our advice, I say again, is for employers to plan accordingly, prepare your roster of candidates for registration. And right now, while we're still waiting for the organizational accounts to be launched and implemented, I think you should already be coordinating with your prospective beneficiaries and ensuring that they have valid passports for submission during the registration period. So work with these employees and ensure that the requirements will be ready by the time the registration period opens. And lastly, I mean, the firm will continue to provide updates and insights on this cap registration process. There's so many changes that we will continue to devote sessions on this topic. So please continue to follow us.
Absolutely wonderful advice, Gladys and Dolores. This does bring us to the end of our conversation. We are out of time, so thank you so much for joining us today. A special thank you to Dolores and Gladys for sharing their insights with us. To stay up to date, please subscribe and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If this video was helpful, please make sure to give it a like. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to email us anytime at info@chug.com. And join us back here next week for more pressing topics that truly matter to you and your business. Until next time, stay safe and take care. Thank you so much, everyone.